You know, when the director of the Secret Service, Kim Cheatle, walked into those congressional hearings under subpoena, by the way, I thought, man, we're going to get some answers, some facts, and she's going to be able to put some of these conspiracies to rest. But I think she did quite the opposite by fueling some more conspiracies. And today I'm going to tell you some of the craziest takeaways from this almost 5-hour hearing. But I'm also going to tell you the biggest takeaway from this entire thing. It may or may not be what you're thinking, and I'd love to hear your thoughts after the video. If you like what I do, consider subscribing. Let's go and get into it. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the gun control that some of the left took this opportunity to go ahead and talk about. And it is something that's been a little bit more quiet this time around. You know, obviously it's not necessarily a mass shooting event, but it's still a high profile shooting, right? And there's been some talk of it, but not a lot. Well, these representatives, they made sure to use some time towards that. Now, to be fair, there was good questions on the left and the right, but some of the questions were, you know, about the AR. Most of it was about the AR. So they would ask questions like, hey, does the fact that Americans can own AR-15s make your job any harder? Since the creation of the Secret Service has always known that firearms and Americans go together like peanut butter and jelly. And so they've always had to consider the fact that, you know, firearms are just a way of life in America. So does it make their job harder? Well, no, not necessarily, because unless they're just living under a rock, every protocol that they've ever had to write, every venue that they've ever had to keep secure has to account for the fact that there's a lot of Americans with firearms. Now, what I find interesting about this, although there was a little bit of talk about concealed carry and open carry and all of that kind of stuff, most of it was revolved around the AR, and that's simply because it's a scary gun. It's one that you can look at and be like, oh my God, you know, yeah, there's nobody that should really have that. Not taking into consideration how many tens and tens of millions of Americans have these weapons, and they're literally used in less than 3% of the crimes in the United States. Period. Handguns are used way more often than that. I bring that up because if they really cared about that issue, they'd either say all guns or they'd start with handguns, because those are used in the overwhelming majority of crimes that involve firearms. Handguns are the ones they should be talking about. But again, they try to go after the big bad wolf and what they consider the AR-15. Now, another thing that was really interesting, and one word I heard a lot during this, and by the way, the first couple hours, I'm like, I'm not going to be able to make anything on this, because she was saying a whole lot of nothing. And whether she resigns or gets fired, one thing is for sure, Kim Cheatle will have a promising career in politics, because she gives some of the best non-answers I've ever heard. Overwatch was brought up a lot. So some of the representatives were like, okay, Overwatch. So does that mean that you had somebody in the tower? She said no to that one. But then when they asked about drones, she said, yeah, sometimes we use drones and other technology at some events, but I'm not specifically talking about this one. They brought up a good point. Well, the tower seemed like the best place to have somebody. If not, the AGR building was probably the second best. Even the 20-year-old kid knew that. That's why he picked that building, and he was flying a drone. Why weren't you? Now, of course, she wouldn't confirm or deny that. But if she's already saying that, yes, we use technology, including drones, why wouldn't you just say, yes, we were using a drone here? Now, of course, that would lead to further incompetency on her part and whoever signed off on those plans. But she did not come to the table with any kind of answer when it came to the specific rally, at least when it, you know, was talking about Overwatch. So according to her, there was some kind of Overwatch there. And that just fuels the conspiracy for a second shooter theory. Because when we looked at that a couple of days ago, it looks like there's something there. I was thinking, okay, maybe Secret Service did put somebody up there. Now, of course, that makes it even worse, the fact that they were overlooking the AGR building, right? And so that's like, how the hell could anybody get up there at that point without you knowing for sure? Because that is like one of the most ideal vantage points. So she just fueled the whole second shooter thing more than probably anybody. And quite a few representatives walked out of the hearing saying, I believe now more than ever that there was a second shooter. That's what a lot of those congressmen walked away thinking. And I don't blame them, especially when you're getting a whole lot of non-answers. They asked her how that building was not a part of the security perimeter. She mentioned Overwatch. And then some of them grilled her. From potential perjury charges that were brought up by Anna Luna out of Pinellas County in Florida for apparently lying about the fact that she had some conversations with law enforcement and said that that suspicious person was never brought up on their radar. To Nancy Mace,
I would have to get back to you.
That is a no. You're full of shit today.
To this representative in Texas that said she should go back to guarding Doritos.
And you should be fired immediately and go back to guarding Doritos. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
She did not like that comment either. She would move from, representative to representative after their time was up, but she spent a little more time staring him down after that comment.
Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
They talked about the timeline, and how far in advance they knew this guy was suspicious. And they basically came down to it. It was like, hey, when did you go from suspicious to a threat? As soon as he grabbed his gun and he was in the prone position, ready to take a shot. That's as far as you let it go before, they actually said, okay, now we have an active threat. And what's kind of crazy is, it was confirmed by Anthony Guglami, a spokesperson for the Secret Service, that, President Trump has been denied over a half dozen times in the past 2 years for additional resources. She was pressed on this. She was like, no, we gave all the resources that they asked for in this rally. But then if that's the case, how is there such a big gap there, right? There was 20,000 people here. But one thing that I thought was really interesting when she started talking about the amount of people there, the local office there in Pennsylvania for the Secret Service, they pulled 12 people there to move them to an event that Jill Biden was at, some casino, where there was 400 people. They pulled 3 people out of that office to move it to the Trump rally in Butler, where there was 20,000 people. She said there was enough people there. But as one of the congressman said, you're saying there's, 4 times the amount of people needed out of that office to go somewhere where there's 400 people. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So the timelines don't make sense. The holes in the perimeter don't make sense. I mean, it's just a gaping hole in the middle of this perimeter, right? That is just clearly nobody's there to oversee it. Even though they have Overwatch, nobody's there to oversee the most prime building, or the most prime building there, essentially, to take a shot at the president. They talked about the bad work environment. They compared her to Stuart Knight. And, Congressman said, hey, you know what Stuart Knight did after Ronald Reagan got shot? She didn't know that Stuart Knight resigned after that. When you have this big of a security breach, right? Or this big of a national security threat where people aren't even safe enough or don't feel safe enough to go to a political rally with one of the highest and most targeted people in the entire world, that's a problem, and that's where you need to take a look at yourself and, step down. I think it's really interesting too. She left Pepsi, right? Where she had like a $1.2 million salary. Now she makes I think $280,000 as her salary at the Secret Service. That's nothing to sneeze at. That's an incredible salary. But who the hell takes that kind of a pay cut? I don't know. I'm just saying, I think that's really weird. But anyways. And unfortunately, that's not her only blunder. Jake Sullivan actually had his house broken into. And her job with, I think she said 8,000 agents. Her goal is to have 9,500 agents, but right now 8,000. Her job is to protect 36 protectees, and of course, when people are coming in from other countries and venues, things like that, that is their job. And so it's a huge blunder, and she refuses, absolutely adamantly refuses to resign. So while a lot of them called for that, I think one of the biggest takeaways here is that not only is she not willing to really take responsibility, she hasn't fired anybody over this incident, but she knows a lot more than what she's leading on. Through her talks with the FBI, it's clear that she was dodging questions. She wasn't even giving answers to things that people already really know. And so whether that was something that she was instructed to do or she's just really waiting on that FBI investigation, she wasn't willing to answer any of it, which makes me think she knows a heck of a lot more than what she is actually presenting. it made her look even worse than what I thought was possible. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you like what I do, consider subscribing. See you in the next one. And as always, hold them down.